Well, welcome back to session 2 of Embracing Your Kingdom Platform, How to Become a Leader That's Easy to Follow. I'm Stacey.
And I'm Dave Rhodes.
I want to ask you a big question here. Would you rather have 1,000 volunteers or 1,000 leaders? Or if you're not on a church staff, would you rather be a volunteer or would you rather be a leader? In our first session, we named that Jesus calls disciples, but he sees leaders. And when we look at the life of Jesus, he's not just creating converts who become volunteers that serve, but rather he's calling disciples, training them then to be sent out on mission. And so as we address and get ready to address 5 skills on how to become a leader that's easy to follow, first thing we want to do in this session is name and identify, are there any challenges or maybe even a problem that might be intentionally or unintentionally holding us back from becoming that kind of leader? So I want to ask you the question again. Would you rather have 1,000 volunteers or have 1,000 leaders?
It's an important question, Shane. And honestly, it's one that answers easy, but does hard. In other words, I know what the right answer is. I know I'm supposed to choose 1,000 leaders, but as a ministry leader, there's lots of days when 1,000 volunteers would just be easier, to be quite frank. Just, if I could have one vision and people could rally around that. I had 1,000 people to help me make that vision happen, and they're just kind of volunteering and serving a little bit. That would be easier to manage than actually developing leaders and then trying to release those leaders in a way that accomplishes the vision of our church, both in the ways that I think and in ways that far exceed that. From a church leader perspective, just in regard to a lay leader in a church, honestly, there's some times that I would just rather volunteer than lead. I just want to show up. I want to check the box. I want to feel like I've done my God thing for the day. And part of that is because leadership carries with it way more responsibility than volunteering does. Way more responsibility to be sent as a missionary than it is to just simply serve. And so I find myself a lot of times resisting that. I think this is important because when we think about, shifting the future of ministry at a church, we have to think about this from both sides of the social contract. We oftentimes underestimate just how strong it is from both sides. As a pastor of a church, I might rather have 1,000 volunteers because it gets a little bit messy when we're developing leaders and releasing leaders, and we're trying to continue to fulfill the vision and mission of the church. And then from a just kind of congregation standpoint, lay leader standpoint, I kind of like the contract too of just showing up and giving a couple hours a week, but not really feeling like I ever have to lead. Problem is, Jesus doesn't allow us to get away with that. In fact, Jesus in the book of John, chapter 14, looks at his disciples and says, you guys are going to do greater things than me. So Jesus challenges us, not just in his methodology, but in his expectation of what can happen beyond him.
Yeah, and Dave, we're going to start that by first going back to Jesus and taking an opportunity to look at what do we see in the life of Christ. And when you think about the Gospels and you think about what you see in the beginning of the Gospels, I think of John chapter 1, there is this start where Jesus is inviting his followers to come and see. And we see, John's got John the Baptist got some disciples around him. He says and points to Jesus, behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. And John then quotes there in the Gospels or depicts there in the Gospels that Jesus is ultimately then inviting those early disciples to say, come and see. And the whole first part of the Gospels is this repeating of come and see. Andrew finds Peter. We found the Messiah, right? Philip finds Nathanael, and there's this come and see. And so the Gospels open with this invitation to come and see, but the Gospels end in a very different sort of way, right? John's going to end his Gospel with Jesus saying, as the Father sent me, I'm sending you. Matthew's going to end that with what we know as the Great Commission, go and make disciples. And so it begins, the bookends of Jesus's ministry start with a come and see and results in a go and make. And everything Jesus does in the middle, Dave, is about leadership development. He's training everyday people to become these reproducing disciples. And Jesus, again, we've said this multiple times, but Jesus calls disciples, but he sees leaders.
Yeah, so part of the naming the problem is to recognize that in the way we do church in the modern world, oftentimes these bookends of come and see and go and make have been slightly subverted. And instead of come and see, go and make, here's the typical MO inside of our churches today. It starts with come and see, but it ends with bring and invite. So what happens is bring and invite subtly subverts this idea of come and see. And here's what happens when that happens. It means that all ministry starts to be centralized at the church, and therefore, what it means for me to grow in my faith is to start with come and see, get connected to that whole thing, and then serve the centralized thing. And as I go into the world, at best, I can bring and invite other people to this thing. And they come to take part in that thing that I am serving. Now, again, I want to go back here and reiterate what we're saying many, many times. It's not that invite and bring is inaccurate. It's just that it's inadequate. It doesn't get to the finish line that Jesus places as the finish line. And what that means, going back to video 1, is that we run an assimilation funnel, but never really get to a multiplication funnel. And to quite frankly, whether I'm a church leader or whether I'm just a lay leader in the church, it's hard to get to the finish line that Jesus gets to, because I never think I'm ready. Like, honestly, as a lay leader in a church, I never think I'm ready. There's more things for me to be formed in. So I never really want to be sent. I'm never ready to be sent. I can never really lead. I can serve. I feel like I can do that, but I never feel like I can lead. And I live with a constant insecurity that I don't really have what it takes to lead. And as a church pastor or staff person, it's easy for me to keep people in that position, because if I keep people in that position, then we can make sure we get all of our volunteer slots filled at the church. And I can recruit them into that, and we can have, good events and good Sunday services and programs happen throughout the week. And I feel like we're accomplishing the mission. But here's the thing. We're never going to get to all the world. We're never going to fulfill the Great Commission with a come and see, invite and bring mentality. We got to get back to the Gospels, come and see, go and make.
Yeah, David, actually reminds me of a story just from my own experience. I came on staff at a multi-site church. And again, we're having the conversations as staff. We want to build a disciple-making culture. But in the first few weeks of being on staff, I had a young woman make an appointment with me. And as she sat down, she was in her 30s. Her name's Lori. And as we sat down together, she wanted to just say, like, I have these dreams in my heart and these things that I want to do and these things I want to, be a part of. And just basically asking, how can the church, help me in that? Or, where in the church might I be able to engage in that? And so as I was listening to her story, I was trying to understand a little bit of, where she's already engaged in things. First, find out that she's working for an organization that does fitness and health training. She has 300 coaches that she's developed and raised up, and who are working literally with hundreds of other individuals and people. And so when I heard that, I was asking, well, where are you already engaged and involved in the church? And she says, well, I'm part of the women's Bible study. And I'm thinking, are you teaching? Are you leading all the table leaders? I mean, there's literally hundreds of women that come on this Wednesday morning study. And she says, no. She's like, actually, they asked me to be at the kids check-in And I think because they thought I was young, I would understand how to use that, the new computer and the new technology to digitally check kids in. And because I was a mom, maybe I'd know the other moms. And my heart just sank, Dave, as I heard her share that, because I thought, man, this is so often what we do sometimes as church leaders. The only imagination that we had for Lori, who is this incredible young leader, the only imagination we had as a church is that could she stand by the computer and digitally check in kids?
Yeah, I think about an example of a high executive leader that I knew that was really working in the secular world, and their heart was to pastor their workspace.
Mm.
And they try to do that as much as they possibly can. More ministry probably took place in their office than in many of our churches, quite frankly, many times. But when that ministry leader, or when that leader, that business leader came to church, the greatest imagination of the church was to try and recruit her into the greeting team.
Mm.
Now, she was incredibly humble. She was happy to join the greeting team, but what she wanted was to our church, the church, to help her pastor her workspace.
Right.
But we had no imagination for that.
Hmm.
What would your church do with someone that was high capacity that wanted to pastor their workspace?
It's great.
Would you know what to do with them? And would your leadership development help them do that with influence and impact? Maybe you are a lay leader and you have an inclination toward that kind of thing. You want to be that kind of person, but you're just trying to figure out whether you can or not. And you're living with that kind of insecurity, and you just need a couple of tools that you could use that would help you out. Well, this problem oftentimes holds us back from going and making disciples and sending people out as missionaries to where they live, work, and play. So in session 2, we are trying to name that problem specifically at the church and for ourselves as lay leaders in a way that, as we name it well, we can get to a solution. So I know, Shane, in this session, you want to introduce a tool to us that we're going to use.
Yeah.
And at the end of the video, we want you to fill this out before going to video number 3.
Yeah, Dave, it's really is important to be able to name the problem. I think, legend has it that Albert Einstein, was at, challenged, if you had an hour to solve a world problem, how would you go about doing it? And he said, I'd take the first 59 minutes to define the problem, because once you define the problem, it becomes more self-evident of what the solution may be. And so it's so important that we take time to actually name what are the challenge that we're uniquely facing, so that as we step into everything else we're going to step into, we know that we're doing so, bringing solution in essence, and bringing our own development into areas that specifically we need development in. So the tool that we want to look at is what we call simply just a problem statement, creating a problem statement. And we're asking really 2 questions here. The first part of that is to say, in order to multiply missional leaders, we as a church staff must become or do more blank, blank, and blank. And as our emerging everyday leaders become or do more blank, blank, and blank. And so maybe just to think about this, prime the pump a little bit. Things that we've heard, things that we've experienced, even in our own journeys and our own leadership on this as well. As you might, as church staff say, in order to multiply missional leaders, we as a church staff must become or do more, maybe helping people name their special calling, or maybe become developers more than doers, or celebrate, a new finish line of discipleship that is beyond volunteerism. The other side of that, when it comes to that bottom part of that question, is statement, as emerging leaders become or do more. And we recognize that, again, it's not all on us as church staff. There's some realities that need to be adjusted, or maybe to change, or to grow, leaders that need to grow into as well. And so you might have things like that lift their eyes to see their missional field that God has actually placed them in. to believe that God really can use them, like we talked about in the first session, or to learn to build and to work with a missional family. And if you're a church staff member, we want you to really think about through what is it that we need to do more of. One way to do that might be to think about, what do we need to be doing less of, and, name the opposite of that. Now, at the same time, if you're not on a church staff and you're an everyday leader, then want to encourage you to think about it this way: what, as part of the church, what do you feel that your church needs to become or do more of in order for you to become more of the kingdom leader that God's that you desiring you to be, and that you would long for them to do, but also to look at it and name it for yourself as an emerging leader. What is it that I need to become or do more of if I'm going to step into and embrace my kingdom platform and join God in what he's doing in the mission field that he's already placed me in?
Yeah, I love that. Remember, the title of this whole video series is Embracing Your Kingdom Platform. And, what we're really asking in this naming the problem is what holds us back from doing that. In a church, there's only limited platform, but in the world, there are multiple platforms that we can step into. There's an ever expanding number of platforms that we could actually form our disciples for and develop them as leaders to be able to lead on those platforms. So here in video series session 2, we're naming the problem. And then the next 5 videos that follow will be trying to help you work toward the solution. And what we're going to say is, as people are embracing their kingdom platform, there's 5 things that we need to equip them in. As you embrace your kingdom platform, there's 5 things that you need to carry with you as a leader: vision, voice, vocabulary, voyage, and vehicle. In the next 5 sessions, we're going to take these things one by one, and we're going to give you tools to work these things out so that you have this stuff as a leader to increase your influence and impact. So in video session number 3, we're going to start with vision. And this is an important thing. We can't wait to talk to you about it, but don't go to video 3 until you take the time to work on naming the problem from session 2. So take some time to do that, and then we'll see you in the next session.